Unauthorized use may result in legal liability. I woke up to a sudden splash of icy water against my face. My head throbbed, my body ached, and the acrid taste of alcohol burned my throat. I coughed, only to be met with a brutal punch to my stomach. "Rise and shine, Dave." Charlie's voice was laced with mockery, almost affectionate. "We're working hard here, and you're just sleeping?" My head jerked to the side, pain shooting through the back of my skull. That's when I realized. I was tied to a tree, my arms completely numb from the tight ropes. Across from me, illuminated by the flickering firelight, stood my friends, my former business partners. Charlie, Greg, Vince, and Owen. For bastards with whom I had once built a company. I wheezed, trying to draw breath. My hands were bound behind me, the ropes biting into my wrists. My legs were also restrained. I struggled, but it was pointless. "Well, genius." Vince crouched in front of me, his whiskey-laden breath making my stomach turn. "Was it worth acting like a big shot? You could have been sitting at the table with us, drinking the finest whiskey instead of choking on dirt." Greg knelt beside me, gripping my jaw with brutal force, forcing my mouth open. "Why so quiet, huh?" He smirked. "Too proud to beg? Don't worry, we'll loosen your tongue." He gestured, and someone behind me poured more liquor down my throat. I gagged, trying to cough it up, but they only laughed. "Good boy," Owen nodded, pulling out a cigarette pack from his pocket. "Now tell us, Dave, why did you betray us?" "Screw you," I rasped, but before I could finish, another fist slammed into my face. "Oh, look at that. Still got some fight in you," Vince chuckled. "That's good. We wouldn't want the night to end too quickly." Charlie crouched in front of me, his eyes gleaming with drunken excitement. "You think you're some righteous man, Dave? Defending your precious honor? Let me tell you something, honor doesn't pay the bills." I spat blood onto his boots. "Hero," Greg laughed, grabbing a fistful of my hair and yanking my head back. "Let's see how long that attitude lasts." Owen pulled a pocket knife from his jacket and flicked the blade open with a slow, deliberate motion, the metal gleaming in the firelight. "Maybe he'll be more cooperative after losing something valuable," he mused, waving the knife inches from my face. "Or maybe we just teach him how the real world works," Vince added, taking another swig of whiskey. "They weren't planning to kill me. Not immediately. They wanted to have fun first. But they had made a mistake. They left me alive." Charlie leaned in closer, his smirk widening. He patted my cheek like an old friend. "You had a fine wife, Dave," he murmured, idly picking at the dried mud on his jeans with his fingernail. "A real firecracker, you know that? Do you even realize just how much?" I didn't respond, though every muscle in my body tensed. "Why so gloomy?" Vince chimed in, grinning. "We're all honest men here. No secrets between us." Greg chuckled, pulling out his phone and scrolling through his gallery. "Here, take a look," he said, turning the screen toward me. I squinted. My vision was still blurry from the beating, but when the image became clear, I wished I had never seen it. Amanda, my wife, naked, legs spread, her hair disheveled. And next to her, Charlie, his hand wrapped around her throat, her lips curled into a sultry, whorish smile aimed straight at the camera. "Remember how you used to call her a real lady?" Charlie laughed, slapping Vince on the shoulder. "Well, turns out she was only a lady for you. With us, she was something else entirely. You wouldn't believe the twisted fantasies she has," Owen added, kicking me in the ribs. "She only played the good girl for you." But in reality, Greg kept scrolling, showing more photos and videos. Amanda kneeling between Vince's legs, fumbling with his zipper. Amanda straddling Greg, her nails digging into his shoulders. Amanda bound, gagged, her eyes half-lidded with pleasure as Charlie filmed her face in close-up. I clenched my eyes shut, but Vince yanked my hair, forcing me to look. No, Davy. Don't turn away," he growled. "Enjoy the show. It's your wife, after all." Charlie took another swig of whiskey and snorted. "Remember that night when we all took turns?" He glanced at the others. "That was the night you were away on a business trip. She was so needy, begged us for more." Yeah. And then she said she was tired," Owen cackled. "So we gave her a 10-minute break." They all laughed. Loud, vile, like a pack of hyenas. I trembled with rage, but I was helpless, tied up, humiliated, crushed. "Damn, Amanda was fun," Greg mused. "But you know whose caught our eye now?" He crouched in front of me, his breath foul with alcohol and cigarettes. I stared at him, dreading the answer. "Alice," he whispered. "My daughter." I lunged forward, But Owen's boot slammed into my chest, pinning me back against the tree. "Easy there," he sneered. "We're just saying, a little more time, and she'll be grown up. And then, we'll show her the same good time we gave her mommy," Vince chuckled. "You wouldn't mind, would you, Davy?" My world turned red. The fury inside me ignited like an inferno, consuming everything else. I no longer felt pain, only hatred. These bastards thought they would kill me tonight. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had left me breathing. Charlie struck first, a brutal punch to my gut, expertly aimed. The air was forced from my lungs, and I gasped, struggling for breath. Vince followed up with a blow to my face. Something cracked, and warmth trickled down my lips. "Oh, look at him. Still conscious." Owen laughed. "Let's see how long that lasts." Greg kicked me, knocking me to the ground. My skull slammed against a tree root, stars bursting in my vision. Pain followed, sharp, merciless, tearing through my ribs as Charlie stomped down. "You were always dead weight, Dave," he muttered, delivering another vicious kick. Always playing the good guy, always getting in the way. I curled up, instinctively trying to protect myself, but they weren't done. "Hold him up," Vince ordered. Rough hands grabbed my shoulders, yanking me onto my knees. Vince smiled and swung, his fist colliding with my temple. My head snapped back, white-hot pain exploding through my skull. The world darkened, my body swaying on the brink of unconsciousness. But I held on, because this wasn't the end. Not for me, for them. I don't remember how long it lasted. Maybe a minute, maybe an hour. The blows rained down like storm waves. My face burned, my body ached, my lips were swollen, and a dull pain throbbed in my chest, probably broken ribs. At last, just as I was barely clinging to consciousness, I was yanked to my feet. "That's enough," Greg exhaled, breathing heavily. "Time to wrap up the show." Half conscious, I was dragged toward the car. Through the haze of pain, I felt my wrists being bound with zip ties once again. "That's it. Good boy, Dave," Charlie whispered in my ear as he shoved me into the driver's seat. "Now it's time for your final ride." They strapped me in as if they were carrying friends. Then Charlie patted the hood. "Send him down," he ordered. I heard someone step on the gas, securing the pedal with something heavy. The engine roared, and the car lurched forward. The last thing I saw was the vague silhouettes of my so-called friends watching from the top of the slope. And then the darkness swallowed me. The car picked up speed, bouncing over uneven ground. I tried to move my hands, but my fingers wouldn't obey. My head lolled back against the headrest, warm blood trickling into my collar. Suddenly, a vast expanse of black water stretched before me. The lake. A second later, I felt the car plunge off the cliff. Time slowed. First, the weightless drop. My stomach lurched as if I had been flung into the air. Then, the deafening splash. Ice-cold water surged into the cabin. The car sank slowly, dragging me down with it. The water engulfed me instantly, as frigid as death itself. I felt it seep into my shoes, pull at my clothes, rush into every crevice of the vehicle. The nose of the car tilted downward, sinking into the abyss. I jerked my arms, useless. The plastic ties bit into my wrists. My lungs were already burning, my head spinning. Panic loomed, but I forced myself to focus. I had to act. The knife. I always kept one in the car, stashed in the compartment beneath the driver's seat. A small folding blade, but sharp enough. With numb fingers, I fumbled blindly beneath the seat, struggling to find it. My hands were clumsy, but then, there it was. The familiar cold steel. I gripped the handle tightly. No time left. Twisting my arms at an unnatural angle, I sawed furiously at the zip ties. The blade bit into my skin, but I didn't stop. A snap. My hands were free, but there was no time to celebrate. My lungs screamed for air. I reached for the seatbelt. It was jammed. Damn it. I slashed at the fabric, sawing through it in desperate strokes. The car was almost at the bottom now, the crushing pressure squeezing my chest. One final cut, and the belt snapped. But the door wouldn't budge. Water pressure had sealed it shut. I had only one option left. I pulled my legs up and kicked the side window with all my strength. The glass cracked but didn't shatter. Again. The fractures deepened, spiderwebbing across the surface. Once more. With a final, brutal kick, the window exploded in a burst of bubbles, and water rushed in, slamming into my chest. The force yanked me outward, but my pants snagged on the gear shift. I twisted, tore myself free, and surged upward, clawing through the icy depths. Light. There was light somewhere above. I swam with everything I had left, my lungs on fire, my vision darkening. My entire world had shrunk to one desperate thought. Breathe. One last push. I broke the surface, sucking in air with a ragged, choking gasp. Air flooded my lungs as I coughed and spat out lake water, frantically scanning my surroundings. In the distance, near the cliff's edge, laughter echoed. They were still there, watching the dark water. I dove back under and swam away from the crash site. They couldn't know I had survived. I would be back. Lying in the water, hidden among the reeds, I struggled to steady my breathing. My soaked clothes dragged me down, my body screamed from the beating, but the pain didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was staying unseen. Through the night's gloom, I saw them standing at the edge of the cliff, peering down at the lake's surface. Laughing, smirking, joking. Well, that's that, Charlie said, tossing a rock into the water. No more good old Dave. Almost feels sad, Vince smirked, taking a swig from his flask. But hey, at least now nothing's in our way. And best of all, no one's around to whine, Owen added. It's done. Let's get out of here. Greg clapped Charlie on the shoulder. Tomorrow, we'll hold a little memorial, he chuckled. Think Amanda will need some comforting? They burst into laughter as they piled into their car. The engine roared, headlights cut through the darkness, and soon they were gone. I lay in the water for another minute, listening to the fading sound of the motor. Only when I was sure they had truly left did I begin to crawl onto the shore. Pain crushed my chest with every breath, a searing fire in my ribs. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. They thought they had killed me. They were wrong. I clenched my fists, my pulse pounding in my ears. They believed they could erase me like an inconvenient obstacle, a mere nuisance in their path. But I wasn't an obstacle. I was the man who built everything they had. The company we built together was my creation. I was the one who designed the business model, found investors, and closed the first deals. Without me, they would have been nothing. I built it, and they merely reaped the rewards. But it wasn't just about business. I never backed down. Never. When I set a goal, I held on to it with a death grip. I pushed through obstacles, broke down walls, and charged forward if I had to. I didn't retreat. I didn't lose. And now, I have a new goal. Revenge. But not just any revenge. I won't let them die quickly. I will turn their lives into hell. Each one of them will regret ever deciding to betray me. Every single one. I exhaled, staring at the darkening road. You just made the worst mistake of your lives, you bastards, I whispered, straightening up. Now, the hunter is me. I knew I couldn't simply walk back into town. Officially, I no longer existed. So I did what I did best. I watched. I tracked each of them. I watched as they returned to their lives, enjoying their freedom. How they drank in bars, smirking at each other, confident that I was dead. How they carried on with the business we had once started together. But most of all, I watched her. Amanda. I stood in the rain across from our house, watching as she slowly, deliberately, unlocked the door, her face carefully set in sorrow. No tears in her eyes, but for the neighbors, the relatives, the friends, she was the grieving widow. I listened as she fed my daughter her web of lies. Alice, he betrayed us, she sobbed, holding her by the shoulders. Your father left us. He ran away with another woman. Alice broke into sobs. No, that's not true. She cried, choking on her tears. Dad would never do that. He loves us. He loved us, sweetheart. Amanda sighed dramatically, turning away just in time to hide the satisfied smirk on her lips. I clenched my teeth. How could you? My daughter was drowning in despair. She locked herself in her room, stopped talking to anyone. At school, she sat alone, her eyes hollow. She was waiting for me to come back. And her mother. She didn't care. I saw it. She didn't grieve, didn't mourn, didn't suffer. She smiled. She laughed. She drank wine in the company of the very men who had tried to kill me. She knew everything, and she enjoyed it. I saw Charlie arriving at her house late at night. I saw Owen kiss her cheek at a restaurant. I saw Vince slap her thigh when he thought no one was looking. She was having fun. She was celebrating my death. I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. Good. Keep celebrating, Amanda. Keep thinking you've won. Very soon, I'll be back. And then you'll know what real fear is. I sat in the shadows of an old warehouse, watching the building across the street, the office of our company. No, not ours anymore. Now, it was a nest of traitors. A cigarette smoldered between my fingers as I watched those bastards walk inside, one by one. All four of them. Charlie, Vince, Owen, Greg, my former family. They thought they had one. But I knew their secret. Jeremy Garden. That bastard had offered us a deal, one I had refused. Big money, rapid growth, but at what cost? Smuggling, illegal equipment shipments, document fraud. It was filth that would land them in court sooner or later. Back then, I told them, we're not doing this. This is the end. If we agree, it's only a matter of time before we get locked up. But they wouldn't listen. You're too righteous, Dave, Vince sneered. Afraid to take a little risk? Risk? I clenched my fists. This isn't risk. This is suicide. But they had already made their choice. They decided to get rid of me so they could make their deal with Garden. That's what all of this had been about. I had thought my life was perfect. A loving wife. Loyal friends. Lies. Every memory now pulsed with pain. The way Amanda kissed me goodbye in the morning before work. The way Alice ran into my arms after school. The way we all sat in the office, dreaming about the future. It had all been a lie. My loving wife had been sleeping with them. My loyal friends had tried to kill me. Now, they would pay. I flicked the cigarette away and crushed it under my boot. I'm coming for you. Charlie, Vince, Owen, and Greg started to panic the moment they saw the messages on their homes. The red letters, bold as blood, burned into their vision, sending a cold shiver down their spines. They knew what they had done. They were certain Dave was dead. But now someone knew. Someone was watching. Amanda let out a sharp cry when she unfolded the letter. Her hands trembled as she read the single sentence, I'm coming for you. Her heart pounded so hard it became difficult to breathe. She hastily crumpled the paper, but the feeling of looming danger had already burrowed deep into her mind. They gathered at Vince's house. Behind locked doors, in a living room shrouded by thick curtains, the five of them argued, trying to figure out who could have left the messages. It can't be him. Vince ran a hand over his face. We saw the car go under. Damn it, I saw it myself. Then who? Owen rubbed his temples anxiously. Maybe someone was there? Maybe some fishermen found, or the cops know something. Don't be an idiot. What cops? If they knew, we'd already be in handcuffs. Charlie snapped. Amanda sat off to the side, pale as a ghost. She was no longer the confident woman who had traded her husband for depravity. Now, she was a frightened victim who understood one thing. Retribution was inevitable. Dave listened to their conversation from the shadows, hidden just beyond the window. He saw their fear, their panic. He felt their desperation. And this was only the beginning. I savored their fear. It grew like a weed, creeping into their bones, poisoning their minds. I wasn't in a hurry. Let each of them live through what I felt when they stuffed me into that car bound, beaten, gagged. When I sank into the freezing water, feeling my lungs burst from the lack of air. Now, their nightmares were my music. I waited. I let them believe, for a little while, that it was over. Then it began. Vince was the first to receive a gift, a plastic zip tie, cinched so tightly that trying to break it would cut into the skin. I left it right on his doorstep. He stood in front of his door for a long time, too afraid to touch it. His wife came outside, but with shaking hands, he just shoved her back inside and slammed the door shut. Charlie. My old friend Charlie. He always loved playing tough. Until he found a wet rag in his bathroom, twisted into the shape of a gag. It took him a moment to understand what it meant. But when he did, he vomited right into the sink. Owen. He lived in his big house, with alarms, with cameras. But the cameras didn't catch how boot prints appeared on his windshield. As if someone had stood there, perched on top, leaning over to stare at him through the glass in the dead of night. He didn't drive that car again. Greg. Poor Greg. He had always been the weakest. So, for him, I had something special. In his garage, on the mirror, I left a message. Can you hear the water calling? The letters trembled, smeared with blood. I knew he would stare at his reflection, seeing more than just his own silhouette behind him. But Amanda, she deserved a more personal touch. I sent her a package. An old wedding album. She opened it, only to find that every page was covered in a single phrase. You kissed me, knowing you would betray me. I watched her hands tremble, saw her clutch her phone, unsure whom to call. She even considered dialing my old number. But I wouldn't answer. Not yet. They tried to meet again. I listened from the shadows, watching them, drinking in their anxious voices. Someone's messing with us. Owen tried to sound confident, but panic laced his words. Someone must have found out. Who? Greg slammed his fist on the table. What if? Vince froze, unable to finish the sentence. What if what? Charlie turned to him, wild-eyed. What if it's him? Vince finally whispered. slowly scanning the room as if I could be standing right behind him. A smirk curled my lips. They didn't know. They couldn't be sure. But now, every drop of rain, every unexpected call, every shadow in the night reminded them of me. And this was only the beginning. I had waited long enough. Their fears had taken root, twisting into something real, something tangible. Their own minds were killing them, haunting them in nightmares that left them waking in cold sweats. But now, it was time to turn those fears into reality. I started with Greg. He was the weakest, the coward. Breaking him would be easy. His house was ordinary, unremarkable. I had watched him for days, learning his habits, his routines. He lived alone, making him the perfect first target. Night fell. Greg was in the shower. The hot water roared, drowning out the sound of my footsteps as I slipped into his home, locking the door behind me. Moving silently, like a shadow, giving him no chance of escape. I stepped into the bathroom unhurried. At first, he didn't hear me. Only when I pulled back the shower curtain did he snap his head up, startled, water streaming down his face. What the F? I struck. A sharp slap, knocking him off balance. He crashed into the tub, gasping from the impact. Dave. His voice trembled. You're dead. I smirked. Doesn't look like it, does it? He scrambled, trying to get up, but I pressed my foot against his chest, pinning him down. He groaned, wheezing, grabbing at my leg, but I didn't give him time. I grabbed his left arm and twisted it sharply backward. A sickening snap. Greg's scream tore through the bathroom as his bones shattered. He writhed, kicking, trying to free himself. Hurts, doesn't it? I leaned in, gripping his broken arm. Did it hurt when you kicked me? When you broke my ribs? When you tied me up so tight I couldn't feel my hands? Please. Please, Dave. It was a mistake. It was Vince. He made us do it. I laughed and drove my fist into his face. His nose exploded in blood. You laughed too, remember? When I was choking. When you watched me drown? I grabbed him by the hair and slammed his head against the edge of the bathtub. Once. Twice. 3 times. He choked, eyes rolling back, blood trickling down the pristine white porcelain. And no, he wheezed, trying to form words. I didn't let him. I pulled out my knife and ran the blade across his throat. A clean, precise cut. His eyes widened, full of understanding and horror, but it was too late. Blood spilled into the water, staining it crimson. I pushed him down, pressing his face beneath the surface. Remember how it felt? I whispered, holding him under. Watching me drown? His body convulsed, legs kicking weakly against the tub. Reflexively gasping for air, finding only water. A minute later, he was still. I straightened up, wiping my hands on his towel. One down. Time to move on to the next. I knew that after Greg's death, they would start scurrying like rats cornered in a trap. Fear had sunk its claws deep into them. None of them knew who would be next. None of them could sleep. They started drinking more, never left their homes alone, armed themselves. But it didn't save them. The police were clueless. Greg was found in his own bathroom, drowned, throat slit, and arm broken, his face battered. No signs of forced entry. The cameras recorded nothing unusual. The police had no motive, and they had no words. They couldn't tell the truth, because then they would send themselves straight to prison. But I didn't give them time to recover. Next was Owen. I watched him for days. He never left his house without his gun, his eyes darting around, his body tense, flinching at every sound. That night, he was alone. His house stood on the outskirts, with a forest stretching behind it. The perfect place to disappear. I entered his house as easily as I had Greg's. He was already asleep, but I knew that wouldn't last long. I had prepared a surprise for him. Step by step, soundlessly, I crept into his bedroom. Under his bed, a briefcase held his pistol. Idiot. He really thought a gun would save him. I leaned close to his ear and whispered, "Wake up, Owen." He jerked, his breath quick and shallow. His eyes fluttered open, locking onto mine. "Dave," he rasped, lunging for his gun. I let him, gave him a second of hope. His fingers wrapped around the grip. Then he howled in pain as the zip tie I had fastened around his wrist tightened brutally, slicing into his skin. "Not so fast, friend." I yanked the blanket off him. He was wearing nothing but boxers. Listen," he stammered, voice trembling. I didn't want this. It was Vince, Charlie. Amanda. It was them. You just watched as they drowned me. You just kicked me when I was gasping for air. You just laughed while I begged for my life." I grabbed him by the throat and hurled him onto the floor. "How does it feel to be helpless, Owen?" I let him savor the moment. He squirmed, struggling against his restraints, his breath rapid and ragged, like a caged animal. You want to live? Dave, please. We were wrong. I'll do anything, A.H. I struck him hard across the face, fracturing his cheekbone. Anything? Good. Then scream. He froze. W what? Scream. Scream like I did in that car. Dave, no. I picked up the hammer I had taken from his garage earlier, and I brought it down on his kneecap. A sickening crunch. A howl of agony. Tears. Louder. Owen. No one will hear you. He screamed like a wounded animal. Please stop. I beg you. I flipped him onto his stomach and straddled his back. You know, Owen, this is only the beginning. I took out my knife and slowly traced the blade down his spine. Do you remember watching me struggle for air? I pressed harder, carving the first deep cut. Now you'll struggle. He sobbed uncontrollably. I stood, grabbed him by the neck, and dragged him across the house to the back door. He fought, but with a shattered leg, resistance was useless. No. We stepped into the dark forest. Remember how they threw me into the water? I whispered in his ear. You're about to experience something similar. I tied him to the trunk of a tree, left him there, bleeding, freezing. His terror-ridden eyes locked onto mine as blood dripped onto the moss below. Then I walked away. By morning, they found him, hanging from a branch. Once again, the police were at a loss. They couldn't understand what was happening. But Vince and Charlie did. They knew. They knew their turn had come. I let them marinate in terror for a while. Now, Vince knew he was next. I saw it in his eyes every time he left his house, constantly looking over his shoulder as if death lurked behind every corner. And he was right. He started drinking even more, kept his lights on all night, hired private security, changed his locks. A pathetic attempt to escape. But I was already inside his house. It was deep into the night. Vince sat in his office, staring grimly into his glass of whiskey. His hand trembled as he brought it to his lips. I watched from the shadows. He didn't know that death was already breathing down his neck. I waited until he stood, unsteady, making his way to the bedroom. He didn't even get the chance to open the door before I slammed a brass knuckle into his temple. He crumpled to the floor, blood trickling from his mouth. Hello, Vince. He choked, trying to lift himself up, but I stomped on his hand. A bone cracked. He screamed. Remember me? Dave, please. I grabbed him by the hair and forced him onto his knees. You were the leader, right? This was your idea? And no. Charlie. Amanda, it was them. You know, I said, I don't care who came up with it. You all did it together. I hit him again, shattering his nose. He tried to say something, but all that came out was a rasping breath. I took the zip ties I had prepared in advance and bound his wrists and ankles. Tell me, Vince, what did you feel when you watched me sink? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was over? I regret it. Too late. I picked up a screwdriver from the table. Slowly, savoring the moment, I pressed it against his fingernail. Remember how you watched me suffocate? Now you'll watch as your nails peel away from your flesh. And with that, I pushed. Vince screamed so loudly that even I felt a chill. 1, 2, 3. Sweat and tears poured from his face, his body convulsing. Enough, he whispered, barely breathing. No. I took a knife and drove it into his thigh, twisting it. You tried to kill me. Why should I be merciful? He could only wheeze, his throat producing nothing but garbled sounds. I grabbed the hammer and slowly lifted it before his face. Let's break a few bones, shall we? See how you like being powerless. The first blow, his right knee. The second, his left. He passed out from the pain. I woke him up by pouring a bucket of ice-cold water over his head. Wake up, Vince. We're just getting started. His eyes opened, but they held nothing but agony. You know what's worse than pain? The anticipation of it. I left him there, bound, broken. I knew he would try to crawl, to escape. And when he was just inches from the exit, I plunged my knife into his back. You made it so far, but not far enough. I watched as the light faded from his eyes. Sweet dreams, Vince. He let out one final, ragged breath, and then he was gone. Another dead. Only Charlie remained. Charlie had lost his mind. He wasn't just afraid anymore. He was in a full-blown panic. He knew the next death would be his. I saw him running through the city, saw his hands tremble as he tried to light a cigarette. He surrounded himself with Protection 6 enforcers. Killers, mercenaries, men without morals, willing to put a bullet in anyone for the right price. But that didn't stop me. I followed him. I saw him barricade himself in his country estate, surrounding it with guards. Pathetic. He thought that would keep him safe. I entered from the back, waited for one of his men to step out for a smoke and snapped his neck in the shadows. Took his weapon, moved inside. But Charlie was smarter than I expected. I crossed the living room and suddenly, floodlights blazed to life. Got you, you son of a bitch. The next second, something heavy struck the back of my head. The world spun into darkness. I collapsed to my knees. They swarmed me, blows raining down my gut, my ribs, my face. I fought back, but there were too many of them. One grabbed my hair and drove his knee into my face. Blood filled my vision, but I fought to the end. Like a cornered beast, I lashed out, plunging my knife into one attacker's thigh, twisting another's arm. Blood sprayed, screams filled the air. But there were too many. Another strike, and then, nothing. I woke up tied to a chair. My head throbbed. My body burned with pain. Charlie stood before me. Smug. Confident. Bastard. Beside him, Amanda. Well, look who's awake, Charlie sneered, sipping his whiskey. How was your nap, Dave? Though. I doubt you were comfortable. I stayed silent, staring him down. You thought you were smarter than everyone? Thought I'd just sit here and wait for my death? He chuckled and turned to Amanda. You were right, baby. This idiot really thought he was some kind of avenger. But you know what? Now he's just a sack of shit tied to a chair. Amanda smirked, crossing her arms. Oh, Dave. She shook her head. You've always been so naive. So stupid. Did you really think you could scare me with your pathetic little notes? I met her gaze. You knew they were going to kill me. She scoffed. Of course I did. I was the one who suggested the car idea. She tilted her head, grinning. You were so pathetic back then, Davy, begging them not to do it. Charlie burst into laughter. Oh, that was a sight. You should have seen your face. We thought you were dead, but now we get a second chance to finish the job. I narrowed my eyes. You sure you have the guts? Charlie's laughter died. Don't push your luck, Dave. You're already dead. I smirked. Then what are you waiting for? Do it yourself. Or are you still the same coward hiding behind others? He tensed, gripping his gun tighter. Amanda stepped closer and leaned in. You asked if I knew? Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. Of course I knew. More than that, she smiled. I enjoyed it. I said nothing. But inside me, something dark and merciless ignited. This wasn't over. Charlie took a swig of whiskey, smirked at me, and gestured to his men. Boys, make sure he forgets his own name. But don't kill him yet. Two of them struck me in the stomach at once. The air was forced from my lungs, and I doubled over, gasping. A third grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. Let's see how long you last, hero. A fist crashed into my face. Another slammed into my ribs. The chair beneath me shook from the impact, but the straps holding my wrists stayed tight. You like pain, don't you? One of them growled, wrapping his hand around my throat, squeezing. Whiskey sloshed in Charlie's glass as he watched the show with lazy amusement. Enjoying the view, Amanda? He asked without even looking at her. I enjoy watching him suffer. I heard her words through the ringing in my ears, tasted blood in my mouth. But I didn't break. I waited. And then my moment came. As one of the guards drew back his fist for another blow, I lunged forward, sinking my teeth into his wrist. He roared in pain, but I didn't let go, not until I felt flesh and muscle tear beneath my teeth. He screamed, stumbling back, blood splattering onto the floor. That was all I needed. Another reached for his knife, but I had already brought my legs up, locking them around his neck and hurling him to the ground. The third lunged at me from behind, too slow. The strap on my wrist strained, then snapped. I was free. The first thing I did was snatch the knife from the nearest guard and drive it into his throat. Blood spurted as he gurgled, clutching at the wound. The second was faster. He pulled his gun. I grabbed the nearest chair and hurled it at him. The shot went wild, slamming into the wall. I closed the distance in an instant, seized his wrist, and twisted until the bone cracked. He howled, and I smashed his face against the table, leaving a streak of blood across the wood. The third was still writhing on the floor. I grabbed the bat lying in the corner and brought it down on his head. Once. Twice. The sickening crunch of bone. His body went limp. Silence. Only the ragged breathing of the wounded, the stench of blood and fear hanging in the air. I turned to Charlie and Amanda. They stood frozen, staring at me in horror. Not so fun anymore, is it, Charlie? I stepped closer. Not when it's you being watched. He didn't answer. He just stepped back. Amanda clutched his arm. Charlie. Her voice trembled. but he was already thinking only of himself. Screw this. He turned and ran. Amanda stayed. I took a step toward her. She flinched. Dave, we can talk. I said nothing. I saw the fear in her eyes. I saw her searching for a way out. But there was no way out. Not anymore. Amanda backed away in terror, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. Dave, please, let's just talk. She didn't meet my eyes. She was looking for an escape, like a rat trapped in a corner. You brought this on yourself. I wasn't going to kill her. No, I wanted her to live, to wake up every night in terror, knowing that I was still out there. But fate had other plans. She stumbled backward, her heel catching on broken glass. Charlie's whiskey bottle. She lost her balance. I didn't even have time to react. She crashed back, her skull slamming against the marble fireplace with a sickening crack. Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened, as if to say something. But the words never came. She collapsed onto the floor, blood slowly pooling around her head. I stared at her for a few seconds. Emotionless. You brought this on yourself. And I turned away. He was still alive. I stepped outside, my eyes immediately locking onto him. He was running. Through the backyard, through the dense garden, toward his car. I chased him. He dove into the driver's seat, started the engine, but I was faster. I leaped onto the hood and slammed my fist into the windshield. The glass cracked. Charlie shrieked and threw the car into reverse. I jumped aside, dodging just as the bumper nearly clipped me. You can't run, Charlie. He slammed his foot on the gas, and in his panic, didn't see the concrete pillar behind him. The car crashed. The back crumpled inward. The engine sputtered and died. He struggled with the door, trying to escape, but I was already there. I ripped the door open and dragged him out by the collar. No, Dave, please. I slammed his head against the car. Once. Twice. The windshield fractured under the force. Please, I'll do anything. I twisted his arm back until his shoulder popped out of its socket. You tried to kill me, Charlie. I yanked him up, forcing him to look at me. You were so sure I was dead. How does it feel, knowing your end is inevitable? He sobbed. I can pay you. I have money. I laughed. You really think this is about money? I wasn't in a hurry. I wanted him to feel every second of his agony. I dragged him toward the old shed. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of oil and rust. An old crowbar hung on the wall. I took it, running my finger along the cold metal. Do you remember how you laughed while I fought for air? I drove the crowbar into his thigh. Charlie screamed, doubling over, but I didn't let him fall. Do you remember watching me drown? I grabbed him by the hair and dragged him toward an old barrel filled with water. Dave, please, no? I forced his head under. He thrashed, convulsed, his body spasming as he choked. I held him there. 1 second. 10. 20. Then I pulled him out. He gasped, coughing, his whole body shaking. Not so pleasant, is it? He couldn't speak. Just sobbed, blood bubbling in his throat. But it wasn't over yet. I hauled him up again, dragging him across the yard. Beyond the darkness lay an abandoned construction site. Rusted rebar. Steel rods. Concrete. You know how a rat dies, Charlie? I lifted him, swung him forward, and impaled his body onto a jagged piece of rebar. The metal pierced through his back and out his chest. He coughed, blood dripping from his lips, his eyes slowly fading. I leaned in. It's over, Charlie. His body twitched one last time. And I walked away, leaving him hanging there. I had done what needed to be done. Now it was finished. I watched as police swarmed the streets, desperate to make sense of the killings. 6 bodies. And not a single lead. No traces. No security footage. They couldn't prove it was me. I knew they had their suspicions. But what could they say? That 6 people, all connected, just happened to end up dead? They had no idea what truly linked them. The case lingered in the air, an unsolved verdict waiting to be passed. I walked away clean, but there was no peace in it. My daughter, Alice, had suffered through hell. She told me what life with her mother had been like. You have no idea, Dad, she murmured, staring into her cup of tea. She could ignore me for weeks, like I didn't exist. Or she'd just snap, screaming at me, blaming me for ruining her life. I clenched my fists. I'm sorry I left you with her. She shook her head. The only thing that matters is that you came back. I tried to be more than just a father to her. I wanted to be her family. We spent time together. I took her on trips, bought her books, watched her favorite movies. But something was missing. The company Vince and Charlie had tried to steal was still mine, and it thrived. I secured one of the biggest contracts in the company's history. A new office, a new team, new opportunities. And then, one day, as I was signing documents at a cafe, she crashed into me. Literally. I didn't even see her coming. Not until the massive cup of coffee she was carrying spilled all over my shirt. "Oh my God," she gasped, eyes wide in horror. I blinked, glancing down at my soaked shirt, then up at her. "Well, at least I'm awake now." She let out a sharp breath. "I'm so sorry. I was running, then my phone rang. And then, well, the coffee was too hot to drink, so I figured I'd just dump it on the first person I saw." I smirked. "Do you always meet people this way?" She groaned, pressing a hand to her forehead. "Usually, I at least let them introduce themselves before I attack them with coffee." I took a good look at her. She was beautiful. Light freckles on her nose, deep brown eyes, a playful smile. "I'm Dave." "Jessica." She grinned. "Let me make it up to you. I'll buy you another coffee. Only if you don't pour it on me this time." She laughed. And that's how it started. At first, Alice was cold toward her. "You're not actually dating this woman, are you, Dad?" She asked, arms crossed. "You don't even know her. And you do? Well, she spills coffee on people. That's something." Alice rolled her eyes. But Jessica found her way in. She didn't force herself into Alice's life. She didn't try to be her mother. She was just there. One day, I walked into the kitchen and found them laughing together. "What's going on here?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Nothing," they said at the same time. Alice turned away, but I caught the smile on her face. A real home. Months passed, and Jessica became a part of our lives. She brought warmth, that sense of home I had been missing. At night, the three of us would sit together, playing board games, watching movies, laughing. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had found what I had lost. Not ghosts of the past, not revenge, the future. And damn, it was a good one.